The world is moving away from fossil fuel, but for Africa, it's only about to start its own development trajectory.
Around 70% of African exports are derived from the oil, gas and mineral sectors and account for half of Africa's GDP.
The appetite for fossil fuel is not necessarily in Africa, it's elsewhere. So if those countries do not have the appetite for fossil fuel anymore, it means that we might have our resources and they become stranded. Literally, we can't exploit them.
Stranded assets are assets that are devalued before the end of their extractable time due to climate policies and market shifts. However, awareness of asset stranding is low among African policymakers. Fossil fuel consumption, carbon emissions, and investment in renewable energy are key for future development. African governments will need a managed, delayed transition towards cleaner technologies.
So Africa currently contributes only 4% of global emissions, and Africa is also among the poorest populations in the world. So what we are asking for is the need to recognize that Africa needs to be supported to achieve certain levels of sustainable development, while at the same time ensuring that development is going to contribute towards a climate secure future for the rest of the world.
And the problem is, how do we then decide, which is a sovereign right that we have because these resources are ours, how do we decide on whether to forgo those resources or to pursue our own developmental agenda?
There is a linear relationship between development and carbon. No one has demonstrated an alternative development model which is not based on the burning of carbon.
Is it possible for us to develop without carbonizing? When one is advised to not use that resource, there has to be another resource on the table, right? So the argument is, if there are no resources, or supporting countries not to use that resource, there has to be something on the table that countries can take up and better the livelihood of their societies.
In addition to difficult trade-offs between carbon-intensive development and emission reduction objectives, issues such as poor planning, ineffective governance, capital flight, and illicit financial flows are up front and center.
There is a question that has been missed. Who benefit from exploration of those assets in the continent? Because we have been extracting, we've been using these resources forever. And you gave example of Nigeria, where it's the first leading, but it's the most poor country. So what's the value of continuing exploiting, but we are not benefiting?
There is a sense that these resources have never truly benefited Africa. But I think another way of seeing it is to say, well, you know, as James said, economies are going to be very carbon intensive. You know, they're driven by carbon. At the same time, if African governments want to industrialize, they need these carbon intensive sectors.
The whole of this continent needs to engage the discussion of stranded assets in our negotiation as a continent.
Here at COP25, let's make sure that most of the policymakers that are here are aware of the issue. They go back and they start planning for it. They understand the risks that are associated with the issues, and they begin to identify how they as a country are going to be able to be ready for when stranded. I mean, and it's not active, it's not just passively waiting for it, it's actively preparing for it. So it's about preparation, preparation, preparation.